Hi guys, and welcome back to another video. So for today's little sketchbook session, I thought it'd be fun to do something a little bit different, as I know a lot of people have asked whether or not I will ever do some sort of comic for my OCs, and the answer is kind of still up in the air. But for now, I kind of want to experiment a little bit with doing like very short little comic strip-esque or like mini comics almost, kind of like that in my sketchbook. So to start off, I ended up doing all the sketching off screen. I'm also sticking a little candy lid underneath the left side of my sketchbook to keep kind of my sketchbook flat while I'm working on it. So for the sketch, I did end up using the Uni Dia Colour, and this is in the color blue. I just thought it'd be a little bit easier for everyone to see rather than me always using red or like the photo blue. In terms of the inking, I'm using the Ohuhu fine liner drawing pens, and I picked out I think 3, but I think I mostly used just the one, and then I will switch to a different pen to help me do a few more values and filling in a lot of the flat blacks. So inking is always a kind of like a weak point for me in terms of my confidence. So I always feel like I struggle with just working with liner in general, or trying to find a good balance between like what I like and what I'm capable of. So to do the kind of like line work, I did pick a finer tipped liner, I guess, if that makes sense. So I didn't want to pick something too thick because I wanted to have like enough detail, but I didn't want to go too thin because I feel like I tend to struggle a little bit more with like thinner line work, if anything. Also, let me know if you have done comics traditionally, and if you do the borders and like little, I guess like your template first before you line everything, or do you do the opposite? Because I kind of play around with that with the left page. I did the boxes first, and then the right hand side I ended up doing with the, I guess like the boxes last, and I found it a little bit more difficult to kind of stay within the lines or like where to stop and start my lines. So I probably will in the future just do everything, like all my outlines first and then fill everything on the inside. Maybe it's easier. So here are the other pens that I mentioned. I did use these in a previous inking video where I did some ink drawings of Ezra from Reverse 1999, but I found that these calligraphy pens would have been perfect for filling in some of the darker areas alongside with just thicker text to kind of give it more of that comic-ish kind of look. So for the idea of the comic, I don't know if how many people are going to actually remember this, but in I think 2 sketchbooks ago, I did a little bit of like a doodle of Kaisen carrying a giant blue kind of teddy bear, and the whole premise was kind of like Koji, Masaki, and Moriko gifted Kaisen this gigantic blue teddy bear, which he did not want, but they thought it would suit him, or like they thought he would want it. So I kind of wanted to give a little bit of context towards that, and I will have like one more small little doodle that I do at the very end, which I'll show you to kind of like tie everything together, because I did not have enough room to fit everything that I wanted to on just one spread. Now in the future, I might considering do like other longer versions, and then we can do multiple spreads, but I wanted something a little bit easier for me to tackle, just to kind of test out whether or not I even enjoy doing the templates like this. So even before tackling doing like the sketching portion and then the inking, I did do very small thumbnails on a different page so that I could plan out what exactly I wanted. I could plan out a little bit of the text as well, and then I did the rough draft for kind of like our sketch, and then we're moving on with the line art right now. And then after that, I will fill in majority of like the flat blacks and some of like the texture with the calligraphy pens. So the calligraphy pens are the ones that I'm using for the text. So they're the kind of pens with the black barrel. So if you see a white barrel, it is the Ohuhu fine liner, and then the black ones are with the calligraphy pens. So the thing I really like about the calligraphy pens is that they have a good range of like kind of the tip size is quite different. So it comes with 3 brush tips, and then it comes with a fine, a medium, and an extra fine. And it kind of has like a squishy tip, but it can get some really thin lines, which I really like. And it kind of helps do some larger areas because it's easier for me to do like flat blacks in kind of more of like a short amount of time, as well as using like extra fine and fine. I can get a little bit more of those hatching details because the tip is still quite sharp. to some degree. I might have to do a bit of experimenting because I believe you can pop off the back of these calligraphy pens and fill in more ink, which would be great because I really would like to just have more refillable-esque type of like pens instead of having cartridges and having to check them every time. But let's talk a little bit more about the comic strip. So I didn't really want to spoil the text right away in terms of like what's going on, but let me give you kind of like the rundown. So the idea is the fact that I wanted to include some kind of scenario where Kaisen is given the giant blue teddy bear, and the scenario that I came up with is that Masaki and Kaisen went to some sort of like arcade or a place that has like a lot of those crane games you often see. So I thought it'd be cute that like Masaki gets quite lucky, so he was able to snag a giant Hansuke plush, which is like the little cat with the glasses, and they were going to gift that to Koji. And because I like to tease Kaisen and like put him into stupid situations, I think he would have like terrible luck, or he just isn't good with these types of stuff, like these types of games. So I would imagine he wouldn't be very good at them and maybe didn't win anything, as you can see by the text. But I feel like Masaki might interpret it a little bit differently, and maybe he thinks that Kaisen wants a prize or like the giant teddy bear in the crane machine. But in reality, it's just hurting Kaisen's pride, if anything. It's more of like a confidence thing. Like he wanted to win because, you know, he thinks he's better than the crane game kind of thing, and just losing to it is kind of like a little bit more frustrating. But that's kind of like the basis. And then Masaki will go tell Koji and Moriko, which they will help kind of procure this gigantic teddy bear in the future, which I would like to do more of like a webtoon-esque styled version of this where I can actually fully flesh out the entire scenario. So if you're interested in that, do let me know, and maybe I will do that for a video, or maybe I'll just do it as a short little post on social media somewhere, because I just kept thinking about the scenario, and very much like coincidentally, a lovely, I think it was like a follower on my Instagram, they actually tagged me in the post on the same day I was sketching out the scenario, and they also thought about the same thing, or like the same scenario based around the teddy bear that was given to Kaisen. So I thought it was just very cute. So I'm glad a lot of you guys still like my OCs, and I definitely want to do more like little mini situations or scenarios for them so that we can kind of get a little bit more of like personalities or like them interacting or just like tidbits of stories, which would be nice. Because I mentioned in the past that I don't think I have a knack for writing, nor do I feel like I want to push myself into that field per se. So I don't really have the current desire to make like a full-blown comic of any sort at this moment. Maybe in the future I will, but for now I'll just leave it as like little mini scenarios and just giving you guys like little tidbits here and there. But I do appreciate all the support that you guys give me in terms of liking my OCs, drawing my OCs, always asking about them and all that. So I do appreciate it. But let's talk about the inking once again. So after I finished up doing all of the, I guess like the line work per se, I went ahead and pulled out the calligraphy pens. I believe I'm using fine and medium to really put in a lot of my flat blacks. So Kaisen has a very dark color palette. He wears kind of like a overshirt, or I guess like more like a flowy cardigan-esque type of shirt, which is just black. And then he has an inside shirt, which is like a very dark muted purple, or like a muted dark burgundy-ish color, wine color maybe. But then his hair is also black. So there's a lot of black to fill on the left hand side where Kaisen is very present, and then there's only a few areas that I need to fill in on the right hand side because Masaki and Hansuke are kind of a lighter color palette, if anything. But hopefully you can see how easy it is for me to fill in the kind of like darker areas that I want to have more flat blacks and like just darker value in general. I did kind of struggle with how, I guess like how I wanted to do the hatching or the shading style for Kaisen. So I did mostly hatching for the most part. I wasn't too sure if I was going to do like cross hatching for the hair, or if I wanted to really like plan out a band of white or like a strip of white for the highlights of his hair. So I ended up doing just mostly like hatching to keep it a little bit more less flat, I guess, if that makes sense. But because of the black kind of being out of the way, I did want to add some other values to the spread as well. So as we're finishing up our inking, I am kind of like keeping in mind at the back of my brain what kind of values I want to include, because I need maybe probably, I guess, like a mid-tone color and probably a lighter color at the least. But I think I end up using 3 or 4 different markers today in terms of filling in the values. I kind of wish I had a better angle for showing you guys how I do the inking. There's definitely sometimes like when my hand is kind of like blocking the entire view, so I do apologize about that. But now with the inking done, I'm going to first erase a lot of my blue lines as much as I can. So I don't want the blue lines to really be present as harshly in terms of like getting in the way of when I'm adding some of the flat grays that I want to add later. So let's go ahead and pull out my kneaded eraser so that we can get rid of these blue lines. Another reason why I chose blue this time, also I have 2 erasers that I can use, but the kneaded eraser does like a pretty good job of everything. Since the majority of the lines are fairly light, I believe there's like some places like at the very bottom left-hand corner of the first page, no, the bottom right-hand corner of the left page where it says hey, I shifted the kind of like text bubble up a bit, so there is kind of like a very harsh hey that's like done in blue that I could not erase, and I believe my white eraser couldn't really get it either, so unfortunately it's gonna be there, but luckily you guys can't really see it on camera. I just have to see it in person. But now that our page is nice and clean, I'm going to stick these little plastic sheets underneath the pages so that we can prep for some other values. So this means that I'm also going to be working with alcohol markers as well, and I want to prevent any bleed through that might occur. So the ones that I chose this time, I did want to keep everything like grayscale, which is more akin to like manga-esque style, or like, I guess like typical black and white printing for any kind of like comics and stuff. So I decided to look at all the grays that I had, and the grays that I chose from the Ohuhu set were the neutral grays. There were some like cooler ones and warmer toned, but to keep everything a little bit more cohesive, I think the neutral tones for the grays was a better fit. Now, I might go and dig around to see if I can find my Copic versions of my gray markers. I think in the past, even before like I was introduced to different like alcohol marker brands, I was able to like secure, I think I have 7 Copic markers and they're all grays. So, or one of them is a colorless blender. I think I have like 6 grays that are in the neutral family, and then I have 1 tonal gray. And I used to do like little black and white drawings in my old sketchbook back when I was in, I think, university, like early university. So it was very fun to do that, and this kind of gave me the same feeling as I did back then. So I definitely want to at least every so often do a little spread of my OCs doing something in this kind of like manga panel-esque kind of style in my sketchbook. I think it's just kind of fun to plan it out, as well as like do more practice on inking and then filling in some of the values with the alcohol markers. For the most part, I did not want to add too dark of shadows for everything, so I picked a pretty light gray to do the indication for like shadows for the face. Kaisen's eyes became quite light. I think I do darken them a little bit, but the other areas that became a little bit darker, I think it's like some areas in his hair, as well as like Masaki's hair and apron is kind of on the more darker mid-tone side. But for the most part, I kept most of the values lighter, just because I do like the contrast between the white of the paper and then the black of the ink, obviously. But because I do want to do another attempt at this digitally in more of a, I was gonna say webtoon style, but I don't even think I can call it that. I want to call it more like a style that I will feel comfortable working with if I do end up doing like digital comics in the future. For now, I think majority of the comics that I do in my sketchbook will be in this kind of like black and white style. But then for digital, I do want to find a good middle ground, because I think it'd be fun to add color so that there's a little bit more context to some of the characters, and then I can have like a little bit of a log of the colors that I want to use to either depict the entirety of a comic So like have a specific color palette, or just have like assigned colors that I can always pick from to make it a little bit easier whenever I'm like drawing certain characters of my own. I'm not sure if that like any of that made sense, but hopefully in the future when I do that, I will explain it a little bit more in a clearer way. But for now, even though I did like the contrast in some of the areas, like for Kaisen's hair or like in his kind of cardigan-esque jacket thing that he likes to wear on top of his shirt, I did end up using kind of like the darker gray to kind of block it in, just to knock it back a little bit and then have a little bit more of those white areas kind of pop forward. So the next one I want to do for sure though is Akemi siblings. So I know some people have been asking more updates about the siblings, more specifically about Akemi's older brother, which I'm happily going to inform you that I am sketching both the older brother and the younger sister a little bit more today. So I'm going to hopefully kind of like finalize their design and see if I get comfortable enough to draw them like more frequently so that I can kind of incorporate them a little bit more naturally. But I would love to do like a little mini comic of kind of like their family dynamic, because there is like a little bit of a, I don't know if it's like a character trope per se, but I have a specific dynamic in my brain that I want for Akemi siblings to have, and kind of like the reason why I even wanted to have a like kind of like an OC that had more siblings, because a lot of my OCs are like only childs, or like they don't really interact with any other family member per se, other than like Masaki and Sato being cousins. But I think it'd be kind of cute to make like a little mini comic for them. And then I will definitely plan some other ones in the future for the rest of my other OCs, like maybe Sato and Moriko, Sato and Akemi, or Masaki and Koji, Koji and Kaisen, and just like a bunch of different combinations I could do for all of them technically. And I've mentioned this on like, I think my most recent stream, but I know a lot of people could not watch it because I stream at a weird time. But I do plan to do another OC scenario suggestion type of video again, so you guys can give me suggestions of what you want to see my OCs doing or interacting, or just any scenario that you kind of want to put my OCs in. I could definitely do like little drawings of them or do another comic again. I think it'll just be fun to push myself to do more OC interactions. So hopefully I'll do that in the future, and hopefully very soon. If not, it'll be kind of like towards the early new year. So in terms of where we're at with the process, I do think this step was a little bit unnecessary. I ended up picking another really light gray. Now, I don't know if this one's specifically a neutral gray or if it's more of a cooler gray. I can't really tell on camera either, but I kind of added it very subtly into the background of the bottom left hand side. I don't remember if I added anywhere else, but it just wasn't really needed. I don't think like that panel needed any other shading around it or anything like that. But we are at the end of the little inking process. So, or I guess like inking and coloring for today, if you can call it coloring. But yeah, here are the little close-ups, as well as like an easier time for you guys to read the text. And I don't know, I just love drawing Kaisen being teased. He's like one of the OCs I think it's like easiest to put him in peculiar situations. Like Masaki I baby a little bit more, and I feel like he's fun to put against like Kaisen as well sometimes. But yeah, hopefully you guys enjoyed today's little process. I will also put in at the very end kind of a glimpse of the little doodle that I ended up doing to kind of tie everything together, because I feel like the way that this started and ends are very vague and it kind of doesn't really make sense. So yeah, I'll definitely put that at the very end so you get a little bit more context. But hopefully you guys enjoyed watching me do a little mini comic page spread, I guess, in my sketchbook. I'm going to show you also the little planning that I ended up doing. So I kind of planned the panels like this. I didn't really stick to it completely, and I definitely need to do more research in terms of how people plan out their panels and the flow of text and everything. But that'll be for a future video probably. So I'll talk to you guys next time in the next video. Bye!